Thank you very much, Dennis, for your very kind introduction. I presume that the little roar there was from the folks in Mowbray's house. Is that right? Attaboy. Now, Dennis, you forgot one thing. I was here on Monday evening, just downstairs, and I was presented, and I'm very proud to say this, with the first Old Boy of Distinction Award. So I spoke at that time about the importance of service, community service, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that with you today. But I want to also recognize the importance of today as Founders Day and the importance of us recognizing and remembering the vision and the desire of Sir John Colborne to build a school that has been extraordinarily successful over the course of nearly 200 years now. And those values and traditions are very much a part of the school. And I want to congratulate the boys of this school, as well as the faculty and staff who have done so much to strengthen those traditions, build them over the years, and make this school the great school that it is today. And I stress the importance of you as students here, and as you leave this school, building on what you've learned here, building on those traditions and values, and have a very successful life over the course of your career from here. Now, I mentioned the Old Boy of Distinction Award because I think that one of the factors that led the selection committee to nominate me for this award was my involvement in community service, volunteer service. And this activity, as I'm sure you now know, is one of the 5 values of Upper Canada College. And to quote from the values statement, UCC inspires boys to become service-oriented leaders, to recognize their ability to positively influence change, and to make a difference in our local and global communities. So I thought it would be useful today to share some of my thoughts on this particular topic because I think it has been a key part of my receiving this award earlier this week. I should say to you that the importance of service was instilled to me very early on by my parents. Shortly after I started in the prep, I guess I was 12 or 13 years old, all the boys were brought into a hall like this, a little bit smaller, to listen to a guest speaker who had been quite involved in the launch in Toronto of what we now know as the United Way. And this man walked in, and I was quite surprised to see that he was my father. And I listened carefully to what he had to say, and I found out later that he was also a founder of what is known as the Heart and Stroke Foundation. And closer to home here at Upper Canada College, he was chairman of the Board of Governors at the time when the old school building was condemned. The tower had to be taken down, rebuilt, and he led the fundraising effort in supporting that building. My mother was also involved in community service. She served the CNIB, the Canadian Institute for the Blind. She drove for the Red Cross, but she is also very involved in our church. All this to say that I was exposed to community service at a very early age. When I was a student here, we weren't required to do the co-curricular activities that is all very much a part of your life here at Upper Canada. A number of years after I left Upper Canada, this became the way you see it today. And it's very impressive to me to see how that ethos is being brought into life. The requirements that you have for co-curricular activities help ensure that you all develop a broad outlook on the needs of others And the range of activities, whether it's from underprivileged communities and peoples in Toronto, volunteer tutoring, hospital volunteering, and the me to we, demonstrate how broad these activities have become. Now, if you are concerned about some of the things that we see around us today, whether it's in North Korea or with ISIS, other problems in the Middle East, Afghanistan, how we deal with countries like China and Russia, it's hard to see how we as individuals can have a direct impact of what's going to happen in those major issues. But we all can have an impact on the strength of our communities. And our communities are the strength of our country. It starts at the ground up. The stronger our communities are at the base, the better we are going to be as a country. And that's where you can have your greatest immediate impact as a volunteer. But whether at home or abroad, these co-curricular activities will expose you to a world that's very different from the one in which many of you have grown up in. It's a privilege to attend Upper Canada College. And for some, the exposure to the outside world, outside of this fairly protected environment, can be a life-changing experience. And for all, I hope that it will leave a lasting impression on the importance of service to your community and will encourage you to continue this work as part of your own career development. Now, I learned the value of service in a more interesting way than many, in that I was a member of Parliament for 14 years. And it's no exaggeration to say that that was the most broadening experience of my whole life. And in particular, working with my constituents and various charitable organizations in my riding exposed me to a very broad world out there. My political career began about 20 years after I'd been in the investment business. But the world that I saw through my political life was quite different from what I had been exposed to on Bay Street. A large part of my time as a member of Parliament was in dealing with major problems. I was very involved, as you've heard, with the deficit, the GST, NAFTA, and for the most part, that was my public face. And that would be the same for many members of Parliament. But what was important for me was to know the impacts of the policies that I was having a fairly significant impact on, what the impact would be on people right across the country, especially people in small, remote, and disadvantaged communities. I traveled from coast to coast. I talked with people at all income levels, hearing what they were concerned about. I remember one meeting. It was in a shed just outside of Regina in Saskatchewan. And I walked into the shed, and there were bales of hay around the walls of the room, and we all sat down on a bale of hay as we talked about some of the issues that were important to the farmers in that community. But all of this gave me crucial insights on how we could design policies that would help people in the country and help them in a way that the broadest possible impact would be achieved. Now recall the tone of this was set by the Prime Minister. He and I used to sit together when I was finance minister, and I had a bunch of difficult issues that I was dealing and wanted to propose. And he would, when we came to a decision point, he would say to me, "Mike, you and I can always leave this place and get a good job and probably earn a lot more money than we do here. But that's not what brought us here. We came here to get elected and to make a difference. So let's get on with it." Now, the most important volunteer work that I did, some say it's probably more important than I did in anything in my public life, has been in the mental health field. I had my first exposure to this as a member of Parliament, where I encountered colleagues and constituents facing personal tragedies. And in my everyday work as a member of Parliament, constituents would come to me and open up very confidentially and talk about the things that they were dealing with at home, either personally, with family members, or colleagues that they knew at work. So I began to understand the impact of mental illness in a very personal way. Now, prior to politics, I had volunteered for the Canadian Cancer Society, and I was one of 45,000 people in Ontario who volunteered for the Cancer Society during the course of a year. But I thought about this as I was about to leave politics, and I realized that I knew no one who was a volunteer in the field of mental health and mental illness. So that's where I decided where I should volunteer, where I thought I could make a difference. And within 2 years, our son Cameron became quite ill with a form of depression, and ultimately this, compounded by the burden of stigma surrounding mental illness, led him to take his own life. And I saw the impact of stigma on Cameron as well as in my volunteer work and as a member of Parliament, and I knew that I had to speak out about it. Now back then, and this was about 20 years ago, no one talked about mental illness. It was something that you kept quiet, you didn't discuss with anybody. So when I, as a former senior minister in the government, spoke out about it, it caught people's attention. And the reaction was something that I didn't anticipate. It was like a door waiting to be pushed open. People would come to me in confidence and share their own stories. I was asked to make speeches and became directly involved in some major mental health organizations, such as the Center for Addiction and Mental Health, and I'm currently the chair of the Mental Health Commission of Canada. So this, while it started about 25 years ago, is still a very important part of my life. But during all of this time in the mental health field, it was always motivating to me to know, in my interaction with people as I went through this work, to know that I was making a difference and helping people. Now, volunteer work should also be a part of the business world. And over the years, it has become a more prominent feature in the business community, much more so now than I saw when I started in business about 45 years ago. In my current position at Barclays, let me give you a very personal example here. Our younger people are the ones that people in our organization who interview university students who are interested in getting into the investment business. So we came up with an idea that it would be a good help for them to develop their interviewing skills by doing mock interviews with students who are in a very underprivileged part of Toronto, where they would probably not get this sort of experience and help, to have them go through a mock interview to be able to help them get a job when they later were coming through their schooling to enter the job force. So it was a very important part of the lives of our students, but also the people who are working, the young folks at Barclays. But beyond these specific activities, business people can receive many benefits from making this form of service an integral part of their activities. Certainly, business people are far more effective if they're engaged in their communities and aware of the challenges and the aspirations of those around them. And by being directly involved, they bring their own experience and expertise, as well as access to their networks, to provide practical support and ideas to many, many volunteer organizations today. But receiving a philanthropic donation is very important for many organizations. What is more important is for the person who is making that donation to also volunteer their time and their energy to support that organization in that way, as well as financially in making that donation. Now let me conclude. Service to our communities can be a very fulfilling experience. The positive sentiment of giving back to our communities, giving back to our country, is very powerful. It's a way of broadening our lives. It's a way of meeting a broad range of new friends. And it's a powerful way to strengthen our communities. The organizations that benefit are helped immensely. There is no way that they could do what they do today without the support of the volunteers in their community. My volunteer work has been a profoundly important part of my life, especially in recent years. And I sometimes would avoid there would be in my life without it. But apart from my personal growth and satisfaction, I know that our communities and our country would not be as strong without the efforts of millions of Canadians providing volunteer support in many, many ways. So let me close by thanking Upper Canada College, you boys in particular, by making service one of your values and taking an active part in developing your understanding, your knowledge, and learning ways that you can be of service to those around you. That way you will improve your own lives as well as improving the lives of those you're helping. And in that, doing this at a very formative stage in your personal development, I hope that you will continue to keep that as a strong value, a strong incentive for yourselves to keep doing volunteer work. So thank you for your attention. I hope that my remarks will help you understand the importance of service, but also will motivate you to become involved yourselves. Thank you very much.